Thank you for pressing play on your device, and welcome to another episode of Over Underrated with your host Fran. Babs is in Belgium somewhere, so I am doing my intro for this episode, where we discuss the Strokes and the Hold Steady. If you're a fan of indie rock and roll, not easy for me to say, we have 2 Brit pop episodes and a group love episode that you may want to check out. Of course, we would invite you to subscribe and leave us a lovely review. We have a great guest joining us today. We have Adam Larter from the 00's collective. He put together 2 playlists and we discuss those in the episode you're about to hear. So, the Strokes, the Hold Steady, are they over or underrated?
Oh, hang on. Yeah, what are we calling this podcast?
Was it over underrated?
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Überschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
So welcome to another episode of Over Underrated. How are we doing today, Fran? And what have you been listening to?
I am fine, and I have been listening to Tom Petty this week.
Oh, I wonder why.
It's the anniversary of him passing, and he's got a new documentary out as well next week at cinema, I believe. So that is why I've been having a dive into the world of Mr. Tom Petty.
Well, I've been listening to Depeche Mode, which happens quite frequently. I've been listening to Barrel of a Gun on repeat. But in terms of kind of new music that I've discovered, I've been listening to a little bit of Holly Golightly. Do you know her?
No.
So I knew her from guesting on a song on Elephant with the White Stripes, and she has like a very distinctive voice. And she came across somewhere else, and I went on a bit of a deep dive, and yeah, I really enjoyed her.
Any track you recommend to our listeners?
From the name alone, Satan is his name.
Beautiful. And we're not alone today. We have a guest. We have comedian and writer Adam Larter. Hello, Adam.
Hi.
So what have you been listening to this week, Adam?
I don't know. A few things. The new Griff Rhys album, singer of Super Furry Animals. His new solo album is very enjoyable. I always think I get the pronunciation of that right. It might be gruff. It's spelled gruff, but I think it's Griff.
I think it's, Griff.
That's a very enjoyable listen. And it sort of feels very modern, but a little bit Crosby, Stills and Nash sort of vibe about it. It's sort of good. In the same way that Fleet Foxes kind of rip it off, but in a nice way. And John Cale just been like that's a continual thing for 2021 is enjoying John Cale, and definitely got not today's discussion at all, but got to the point where I think John Cale is the better member of the Velvet Underground, more so than Lou Reed or Nico.
Oh,
once again, coming with some topics for future episodes. You know, Velvet Underground Showdown, Lou Reed versus John Cale.
I don't think in a malicious way, and I have nothing against Lou Reed, but you go, when you listen to John Cale's solo stuff.
There we go, throwing down the gauntlet for more further listening. But today, Adam, you've chosen 2 bands that fall within the theme we've decided: US indie noughties invasion. They're the 2 bands that we're discussing today. So what is your overrated choice?
My overrated choice is a band called The Strokes.
Overrated.
That's their name. They're from America.
Oh.
Via a million other places as well, because they're like half something else. I don't think actually any one of them is fully American, because even Casablancas is half Danish.
Isn't that most Americans, to be fair?
Yeah.
Wow, The Strokes.
Yeah.
Controversial for a lot of people. So tell us why The Strokes?
You know what? And this feels like backpedaling already, but I still strongly believe they're overrated. But I also believe they are wholeheartedly overrated, but also weirdly enjoy them. So they're a band that I own a couple of albums of, and have been known at many a sort of grungy indie nights to have sort of danced to. But that doesn't mean I think I've never thought they're brilliant. And I don't think they are, and I suppose that's the definition of overrated, deserving quite of like the fandom they have or sort of festival headline spots. I don't think they're not as great a band that sort of history should recognize them as like a pillar of art, quite like is strangely represented in like the amount of records that they've sold or that people would find them an influence. I suppose that's my position, is that, you know, they are just a band that is okay. They are kind of like they do the job. There was something that got in my mind and I couldn't unstick it, is that they are like the Jack Whitehall of like rock music, whereby there's no they know what they're doing and they do it quite well, but you can't, it bugs you, like you can't help feel like if they didn't have the look, would they be half as successful? The look and the celebrity parents, like if they didn't have that, you know, it's privilege rock, really, is that's what you're listening to, is like the enjoyable, danceable sound of white privilege is like the Strokes in a nutshell. But you know, that said, fine, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to hate a band to pick them as overrated, and you've made a very nuanced argument for them. What age were you when the Strokes came out? And I asked just because, you know, I was 13, 14, so prime inception of Hello New Rock era for the teenage years. So I will say up front, I was surprised by this choice, and I might push back on a few things, but I think one of the reasons I like them so much is because I was that age.
Yeah, I was like a late teenager when Is This It came out, and you know, and therefore went into university with like Last Night being the song that was heard in every sort of nightclub night out, regardless of, you know, and it's one of those weird things. You could go to sort of like standard student disco where they're both playing like Peter Andre's Mysterious Girl, and they're playing like the theme from Baywatch and other sort of like student dross, and then they would play like 4 indie songs, like quote unquote indie songs: Blur's Song 2, Arctic Monkeys, I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor, Kaiser Chiefs, I Predict a Riot, and then the other one would be Last Night by the Strokes. And it's like, you know, that would be like enough that would be like tolerated by people who liked pop music and R&B. They'd be fine that you could play those 4 like rock songs. And as like sort of cardigan wearing indie dweeb I was at the time, you know, I was very excited to hear those 4 songs on a non-indie night out when I would have to be dragged to some sort of big generic nightclub. So yeah, I was like right in like the target for like the sort of person who would like the Strokes, and probably why I own a couple of records, because I just bought all of that indie, all of the Franz Ferdinand and Strokes, and it all came in like one package, one NME package. Like you will like all of these things. So I think probably like, again, like I was never, if anyone asked me at that age, like what bands do you like I was excited by all of the other stuff, but like Strokes was still something I owned. Never say I was a Strokes fan. And I think probably only looking back, and then is one of those things you go re-listen to it, and ironically you re-listen to Is This It, thinking about the fuss that was made of it at the time, and the only thought that comes to mind is, yeah, is this it? Is that what we were so excited about? It just sounds like television. This is like a not as good version of television.
So Babs, I should probably ask you, what's your first impressions of the Strokes?
So yeah, I am a Strokes fan, and I came into this quite conflicted, because I do think, and I've written this, people do wang on about them a lot. I'm a huge fan of their first 2 albums, and I think they're perfect. I don't think they've made a good album since then, but they still have made a bunch of good songs. So there's plenty of standouts. I will totally agree with you on the privilege rock, and like basically how they were the inspiration for hipsters, basically. And I found an article, I don't know if you've seen this, Adam, but Franz Nicolai wrote an article on Slate about Meet Me in the Bathroom, you know, the oral history of that time. So I was like, aha, a link. And he wrote about it, and he said, he said that she said the influence of the Strokes was real. The argument that they really did create the blueprint for the international hipster look of the noughties with help from the Vice Media empire is defensible. And good-looking neo-garage bands named some variation of the plural nouns proliferated in New York, London, and beyond for years. I do think that they're good, but are they as good as every journalist was saying? You know, probably not music-wise. I think it was the whole package. I mean, also given who our underrated bands is, where they're very lyrical. I have literally never paid attention to the Strokes lyrics at all. And having, you know, looking into it now, I'm like, yeah, this is really about nothing. But, you know, if you've listened to the podcast before, you know that Fran and I don't care too much about lyrics. So it doesn't really bother me that much. But for me, yeah, they weren't my top band from the scene. You know, I was more of a Hives, Vines, White Stripes gal. But I do still really enjoy their first two albums that, you know, I know every track and can listen without skipping, even if I don't like their later stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you hit that on the nail there. Is like, you know, they are that like headline band of so many things that are going on at the same time. And are they the person that made that movement, or are they just like the nice shortcut for it? It's the same like Sex Pistols get that for punk. Sex Pistols are the definitive punk band. Are they the best punk band? Not by a long shot.
Listen to episode 6, season 1, where we will agree with that one. Yeah.
But it's like, it's really easy for people to remember the Sex Pistols. It's really easy for people to remember, you know, Pretty Vacant. It's like, that is a nice shortcut to punk. You know, are Strokes the best guitar band of the indie revival? Are they even the first band of the indie revival? Would I ever have put a Strokes poster on my wall? No.
I did, and because I'm an idiot, cut out the 5 individual members of the Strokes and put them above my door because they are, unfortunately, very good looking. What can I say? Like, I was a teenage girl. It worked on me. But yeah, Fran, did that work on you?
Were they alongside the band members of 5, Babs, at the same time?
5 was before. I was over 5 by then because I was also, let's say, a music snob rather than an indie dweeb from the ages of like 13 to probably about 21, and then got over myself. But I before then was really into the boy band 5, who were the best boy band ever.
But the thing about the Strokes as well is like, even thinking about them as people, and these are someone who's just like so part of culturally all of the stuff I found really exciting. And I've seen all of their faces and all their music videos and all of that. But like the rest of the band members beyond Julian and, you know, old Albert Guitar Boy, like there's some blur that I wouldn't be able to pick them out of like, just pick 5 blokes out of Topshop and like go, are these members of the Strokes? And I go, oh, I'm not sure. I think so, maybe. Yeah. Has maybe one of them's got a tattoo? I don't know. Yeah.
You did not stare into Nick Valenzi's beautiful blue eyes as long as I did.
One of them's called Nick. Okay,
Two are called Nick to confuse things a little bit.
Are they?
Nick and Nikolai. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that Nick is beautiful. I think that Jack Whitehall would be loved to be compared to the Strokes.
But it's like, you know, if you expect a band possibly also to do some like corporate partnership with like Land Rover, there are some bands of that era like that just be like, nah, no way. You know, they still wanted to be like a rock group, like the Libertines, like, you know, which is, I suppose, you put the Libertines and Strokes for some reason right next to each other because they're both like indie dance floor fillers and festival bands of that time and sort of laddie. But yeah, Strokes, maybe it's because the lyrics don't mean anything, but I have no idea on what their principles, approach, or what they find interesting. I think they like denim. Is that enough to go off of?
So the Bewitched. I do remember Julian was in a very big Converse advert back in the noughties.
Well, I was going to say, there was that song with Julian Casablancas, Santigold, and Pharrell Williams, My Drive Through, which was part of Converse, which is really good. And I looked into that deeper. There's also, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Paloma Faith, Graham Coxon, and Bill, what's his name, from The Coral. They also did a Converse song, which was really good. And you can't find it on the streaming platforms. Like you have to go onto YouTube. So I'm like, you know what? If these corporate sponsorships actually produce good music, fair enough.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Coxon, that his name being thrown into that mix makes me feel quite sad. Like, I'm sure. What was his deal for that? Was he trying to push at the time that got him dragged into that?
Yeah, I think Graham these days does say yes to most things. But when Strokes came out, I was still in that post Britpop hangover of trying to push away anything American. So I think that I wasn't happy with some more Americans taking over my airways. We had Limp Bizkit, we had Linkin Park, and now we had these Strokes. And also they're doing indie, and we do indie. Like we hadn't had an American indie band for a long time.
This is why fucking Brexit happened.
Yeah, no, right. Get these indie bands out of, and they obviously became big in England and obviously sold it around the world. And I think the hype killed it for me because I thought Hard to Explain last night with decent singles. I downloaded the album illegally because obviously Napster was a thing, and it wasn't anything for me. I could not understand why they were the biggest band in England, and it hurt a little bit. And I think by the time the second album came out, I got used to the Strokes, and I didn't hate them because they were so in your face. And I think I preferred at the time the second album because it wasn't, this is the best album you've ever heard. This is the best album I've ever heard by then. So I could maybe listen to it with objectionable ears. And then I saw them live 2004. With the Pixies playing just beforehand, and and the Pixies were terrible, and I'm a fan of the Pixies.
No,
but what happened?
Well, I think sometimes that Francis Black screaming was what's the guitar player called? Carlos?
Joey.
Yeah,
Joey.
Or Joey San, was on a stool doing some wah-wah, was not what the V Festival audience wanted to be. I don't think it was the best place to have a comeback tour at the V Festival. And the Strokes after the Pixies was amazing because I had struggled through the Pixies so badly that when the Strokes came on and played all the songs I knew and the audience was jumping up and down, it was a beautiful thing. So I then became more of a fan after seeing them live. But I think they are overrated because it's been almost 20 years since they did anything amazing. And they're still seen as a headline act. But why? I mean, like the Libertines, why are they hailed 20 years later? They haven't done anything decent, really, in a long time, but still looked upon as being this amazing rock band. But why?
Yeah.
I think maybe because rock isn't as prominent these days, right? Like, Is This It is now 20 years old. And, like, they ushered in the last, rock is mainstream era, I would argue. Just after Britpop.
Let's just give a pause to all of the people who all just went, oh, when you said, is this it? It's 20 years old. Yeah.
That was me earlier today when I realized, 2001 was 20 years ago. Fuck.
Give them a moment. I wanted to pick up on something you're saying there about the British American thing. And it reminded me, and this is an absolute sidetrack, but you said that's cool. So like Stephen Fry, here's where the sidetrack's starting. Stephen Fry once said this, and it's on YouTube, about the difference between British and American comedy. And he said that American comedy heroes, if you look at things like National Lampoon or whatever, are always the people who are like the hero in the joke. They always embarrass someone else, and they always have the biggest dick in the room, and they're like there to go how clever they are. And he talked about this scene from Animal House where John Belushi smashes someone's guitar. And the punchline is he looks at the camera and grins and goes, oh, what about that schmuck? I got one up on him. And like that person is lauded as like the comedy hero, and they're the person you relate to. Like there's something in American society where they want to be proud of the winner. They want to be proud of the person who's the coolest in the scenario. They want to be proud of the person who's like outsmarted someone, and that's that sort of like drive within their culture. Whereas like British culture is built around failure and like owning your failure, and British comedy heroes are always people of lower status who always got shat on from a great height. You can see examples of like the Blackadders of the world, or the the comedy heroes and the people we look to who always get things wrong and things just end up worse and worse and worse for them. You know, it's the same like Basil Fawlty or like Del Boy. They're always low status.
Bottom.
Always exactly. And there's something, and I am bringing it back around. There's something about the Strokes where it's like you listen to their music and you go, these people are, I can't relate to them. They turn up at parties. Their music gives off this vibe, lyrically or otherwise, where they're the sort of people who turn up to a party and everyone thinks, hey guys, you're so cool. And, you know, like, and the stories are just of them, like, all of the stories in their songs are like about like the cool women they're dancing with, the parties they go to, and like the good times they have. And that's not what I'm coming to rock and roll to. You know, I'm coming to rock and roll and everything from like the Beatles to Tom Waits and all of the Kate Bush and everyone in between is kind of like, something's wrong with me. I'm weird, I'm messed up, and I'm nuts, you know, and that's what you want in alternative music. And I was like, yeah, but these guys are the jocks at school. They probably were the bullies. You know, that's what I feel. When
you know that they met at a boarding school in Switzerland.
Oh my God, of course.
Yeah. But I will say, so going back to have either of you read, I don't think you have, Fran, Meet Me in the Bathroom,
No.
the oral history. Okay, so it's written from the perspective of a journalist who was friends with Nick Valencia. I think they worked together in a restaurant. That gave me a bit more respect for the Strokes because they put in a lot more work than I thought they did from doing that. Yeah, because I think I presumed exactly that. And no, like the way it came together and how they managed to get, you know, like slots in different parts around New York, like it was, you know, it was still a bit of a hustle. And I think everyone was surprised how big they got, especially when they went to the UK and Enemy came on as darlings. So I can understand that that's how they come across, but it was interesting to see like how actually that wasn't their kind of origins. And I will say from that book, Paul Banks from Interpol is a fucking nutcase. If you think the Strokes are like, you know, cool, he is absolutely bloody mad, and I wouldn't have guessed it. But anyway,
but Interpol are the interesting version of the Strokes. Like if anyone's like sitting there looking
Joy
at
Division modern, I think I like Interpol,
but if someone's got like 2 CDs in their hand, you can see like there's Antics and there's Is This It, and they're like right next to each other on the shelf, and someone go like, no, that's almost exactly the same, but just with quite a few more ideas, with way more care given
thesaurus as well, for sure.
The argument I haven't even given against the Strokes, which there's probably people screaming at this going like, you know, the musical people, and people have said it better than I have, they are notorious for ripping off a lot of famous tracks. Like their biggest hit, Last Night, sounds almost exactly the same as American Girl by Tom Petty. It's almost like exactly the same as American Girl. And there are loads of other people have gone into this in much more detail than I have. I can't play a single instrument, but you know, it's very difficult to pin too many original ideas to the Strokes. So I don't doubt, Babs, that they put in a lot of work, but it wasn't in the songwriting.
So we go into songs whilst we're talking about the songs.
Let's do it. So what's the first track on your anti-Strokes playlist, Adam?
So Taken for a Fool. One, what is it about? Don't know. But most importantly, the thing about Taken for a Fool is this is from Angles, which is for many people like the best thing they've done. I think this is the general opinion, the best thing they've done since like the early hits. And if you said that was a B-side to Is This It or Room on Fire, you'd go, yeah, okay, I believe that. It feels like they have come musically, lyrically, in any way, no further than where they started at all. And some people love bands for that reason. Like some people love like Iron Maiden because like a new Iron Maiden album comes out and you know what you're getting with that. But like they're in the world of sort of like indie and Americana, and you know, like there's loads of cool stuff going on. Why are you listening to this? And it just sort of starts, it finishes, I'm not bothered. I do remember Taken for a Fool. I've listened to that a good few times, but yeah, I mean, Angles is nice. It's like, for me, you do need some music that you can just pop in on the office or in a cafe or whatever, and it's like there. And there's not, you want an album that isn't suddenly going to have like one really crazy track on it, you know, that spooks everyone. And you don't get that with the Strokes. Is this it, or any Strokes album you can put on in your shop?
It was on in my shop. I was working in HMV, so obviously we put it on before it was released on the Sunday.
Oh, wow.
But Sunday night when we do the charts for the Monday morning, and we all loved Undercover of Darkness. Is it? Yeah. We all thought that was a great comeback single, and then we're waiting for the rest. And yeah, it's got maybe I think 3 songs I can remember. I was shocked to find out this was a single. This was the second single of the album. I had no recollection of that happening. And also, fun fact, the B-side is featuring Elvis Costello doing a duet to the song.
Really?
And you can see footage of them on tour in America, and Elvis will come along and sing in the chorus. So there you go. That gives it a little bit more edge. And I'm not like, Although, I mean, late 70s, it does. That is the era they've taken from the most, so it makes sense they were influenced by the attractions. I guess. Yeah, the chorus is decent. I think the verse is kind of throwaway, but the drum sounds like me beatboxing. It's awful. It's like really? The best they've got. So yeah, I can see why you chose it as a. Yeah, I mean, I guess what is this? Maybe 10 years since the debut, and it wasn't the big comeback because it'd been 6 years since the last album, and it was like, they still haven't delivered again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to come in with some different opinions. So I don't like much from this album, but I do think this is one of the good ones. And for me, it does make sense that it was a single. But yeah, it was actually quite nice to come back to this. And by the way, Adam, just to say, I think your choices are mostly insane for the Strokes. And this is one.
Wait, insane in what way?
As in, you've picked great songs.
Right. Okay.
So yeah. So when this came on, I was like, what's he talking about? Like, I normally, because I like it so much and because I think it is a bit more of a departure, listen to Machu Picchu from this album at the beginning, because that is very original, and the guitar sounds and the way it works, the percussion.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. Like Agadoo, that one. It's got this little tropical vibe to it.
A positive thing, definitely.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
Another party filler.
But I really like the dueling guitars. It's a strong bass. I like how Julian's voice moves between being quite low and then falsetto, and I really like the synths. But I will agree that what the fuck is it about? Here's a little extract for you guys. I know everyone goes any damn place they choose, and I hope everyone well on the toxic radio. A tourist in the ghetto, not afraid of anything except death and anything else that could maybe hurt them. Oh yeah.
There's something about their lyrics where it feels like he's trying to remember them most of the time. Like he's like, it's almost like a question like, sister, you know.
Hey, but actually it was I hadn't really, because I wasn't so interested in this album, I hadn't done much research on it, but it does sound like this was quite a difficult album to make, because I think they wrote most of the songs together, but Casablancas was quite disengaged in the studio. So Nick Valenci said like, I'm not going to do the next album if we make it like this, because he'd just not show up on certain days and I'd have to do guitar by myself with the engineer. So maybe that is why this album is so fractured. And I would say it is, like, Taken for a Fool does sound a bit like Machu Picchu, but there are others that, are very different. And yeah, I would agree that there's not so much good.
I mean, since the first album was basically them drunk in a recording studio by themselves, just doing it in like one take, they have moved on a lot since then. And I guess by then, Julian was a solo artist, which is maybe why he had changed his ways of working. He got me used to working by himself rather than with a band.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Überschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
And I think the next one I've got, if we go off your order there, is Juicebox. So the most memorable thing about this one for me is that David Cross is in the music video. What's interesting is like first 2 albums produced great songs for indie DJs to put on the dance floor. You've got like, Last Night and Someday, and actually the indie club I used to go to would play New York City Cops. And then the second album, you've got Reptilia and there was another one that was
1251.
1251. There you go. You've got two good dance floor songs there. Third album comes out, lead single, really upbeat. Have you ever tried dancing to Juicebox? I mean, it's essentially, as many people pointed out, the Batman theme. The do 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 do
I
do
put down the Scooby-Doo chasey sequence.
You can get the Batman theme. Yeah, it is. Yeah, the Batman Juicebox. But yeah, it's I don't know. It just feels like that. It was like they got that and it was fine, but it doesn't. It is a little bit irritating as a song, but not in a way that like pushes you. In a way that feels like, yeah, the chorus. Why wouldn't you come over here? We've got a city to love. I mean, it's just classic. I think that's what he says. That's like classic Strokes. And again, on the voice, he's got this thing about him that's like him and James Murphy from LCD Sound System, who I do like. Both of them sound like they constantly got a cold. They're not really giving as much effort as they could do to it, or like that's just how they've decided to sing.
Yeah, he always seems to like blur the verse, and suddenly by the time the chorus comes, I better start singing properly by now. The video is quite interesting. It does seem to be a lot of people puking up about a gay sex scene in the toilet. This is quite strange for 2005. I'm for the Strokes. I was kind of happy when this came out because it wasn't Last Night. It was a new Strokes. It felt different. I guess they moved on from the original producer by now and had a bit more of a vaster sound. I love Albert's guitar in this, and also I think Babs is a bass player. I always kind of thought that being the bass player in the Strokes was like the most cushy job you could ever have, because it's basically like dun 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 dun. So I thought by this time, we give him something to do. So they gave him a more interesting bass line for Nikolai to work on. But I think Babs is about to say that I'm wrong. Am I wrong?
I would disagree. Like I can play. Well, is this it? The do 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 do. That's pure Nikolai.
That's a good bass line. That's a really good bass line, yeah,
and a fun one to play as well. It's definitely true that like the Strokes have these two guitarists that work very well together in a very different. And I think this is an absolute banger of a song. And like Fran, even though now you've talked about Batman and Scooby-Doo, I think I am going to interpret it a bit differently. I think the bass and guitar driving it at the beginning are frankly sexy, and I think the different sections work really well together, and they kind of shouldn't. So the Oh Damn Good Years, where you've got the guitar and bass kind of matching each other and driving, and then you've got this melodic, I think it's Nick Valenci playing in the background, and then the Cold You're So Cold, and how it builds at the end. I really, really love this song. So I'm afraid I couldn't possibly say it's overrated, but plenty of others on First Impressions of Earth are. I think, this was the first album to disappoint me, because I think there are songs on here that are so bloody boring, but this isn't one of them.
Yeah, it does have a feeling of, and there was loads of stuff about, like, one of the most common criticisms of Strokes is like the second album, which people liked, is nowhere near as good as the first album. It sounds like exactly the same. So I think they went, third album, it's got to be different,
Mm-hmm.
I think that what's strange is that Is This It was not a number one in any country, but this was their first UK number one. This is always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, they'd built their fan base by then, right? So
you always think that this Is This It was like the best selling album, but it was.
But I will also say what's interesting about you talking about they had to move away. They actually initially set it out to record it with Gordon Raphael, who produced the first two albums. And by the way, for the second album, they were meant to do it with Nigel Godrich of Radiohead, and it didn't work out. So for this one, they were meant to do it with Gordon Raphael, who then introduced them to another producer called David Kahn. And actually it was collaborating with their old producer that didn't work. And then it was just, I think mostly produced by Kahn, if that's how you pronounce it. So interesting that they actually still were going for the same producer. And it was interesting to hear Nigel Godrich being like, look, me and Julian Casablancas are just the same. He had his vision, I had mine, and there was just absolutely no compromise. And that's why they had to go back. But yeah, clearly for the third album, that wasn't enough. And Kahn was the guy they're guiding.
The first album was going to be re-recorded by Gil Norton, the Foo Fighters guy. And then the Strokes had to then fight against to go back to the guy who did the EP. So yeah, I think the record labels are always trying to force them to have like a more of a radio friendly sound. And I think the first album is only on 9 tracks, the entire album, which like by those days of Pro Tools, the average album would have 64 tracks, which is why it sounds so tiny and compressed compared to other rock albums of that generation. But Adam, speaking of their first album, your third track is?
It's called Take It or Leave It. Giving you 2 great options there. And if asked by the Strokes, I would say probably Leave It in this instance. I think, again, you know, I know you've said neither of you are too worried about the lyrics, but this is an
incel anthem. I didn't realize. That's how I interpreted it.
Take It. For me, like, this is like those lyrics that were like the first draft, and then no one else was too like worried about like that. They didn't have a chat about the lyrics. It went in and was recorded, and it was done. And it's quite irritating to listen to. I think there's something like in like I just hear in my head that snippet of like towards the end of it where he's really repeating the take it or leave it thing like a lot. And again, you can hear like the television influence a lot here. It is an irritating song and lazy.
Also, it goes on. It's short, but it feels like 5 minutes. Like it drags. I think it's
yeah.
Even when the first album came out, I always kind of thought this was a crap closer for the album. To be fair,
it's hard work. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think is this it? You know, being up there in those like top albums lists is weird because it's a sort of like EP that got out of hand. You know, I think like you could do it as a 4-track EP, it'd be fine.
I think like a lot of big albums of the noughties, like Hot Fuzz, people think of the big singles and they forget that, you know, it's not all gold. Is this it?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. You put them back to back as albums, absolutely. Hot Fuzz and Is This It? Yeah.
So I like this song. I think it's not one of my favorites, but I think it's a solid inclusion. I like how I've put gnarly and snarly he sounds. Julian Casablancas' voice doesn't annoy me. I quite like how detached he can sound, and sometimes it's almost going between, you know, sort of singing and singing. And the interplay between the bass and guitars going up and down I quite like, and the drums building to the end I do like. However, I had never thought about the lyrics, and when I went and looked at them, I was like, holy fucking cow, yeah. Like I said, this is an incel anthem. It's basically, leave me alone, I'm in control, girls like too much, boys act too tough, enough is enough. She was on the minds of other men, he's gonna let you down. Like, this is a spiteful little shit of a man.
Yeah.
Basically. And I was just like, wow, I really had not thought about it, because yeah, all I thought about was, yeah, take it or leave it or take it. Another song that you've picked later, the chorus annoys me, but for this one it doesn't at all.
You don't feel like when you hear lyrics like that and just think about them, it's like they put so little of themselves out there. Like, they reveal so little about like what they're about. Like, you know, and again, I've listened to a lot of the Strokes. Like, do I get where he's coming from? You know, bands that I really love, like, you know, people say, you know, a really good like Dylan album, something like Blood on the Tracks, is like, people love that because you can hear his soul and you can hear his weakness. And like, you know, really good music allows you to be quite like vulnerable and frail. And that's where you go from sort of like liking a band and hearing in the radio as like pop music, to like forming a connection with the artist. That's true of a great painting as much as it is like a film, as a novel, as a song. If you're judging it as art, there is no vulnerability from the Strokes in any way, shape or form, ironic or unironic, like musically or otherwise. There's no big risk they go about like, oh my God, no Strokes album has come out and someone's gone like, oh God, I wonder what Mum's going to think about this. She thinks like, oh, how many nice little rock songs, like, and that, yeah, take it or leave it. Incel anthem. Yeah, sure it is. Yeah, it's.
Well, yeah, I think Fran and I have similar, slightly different opinions. But yeah, Fran, what do you feel?
I guess the only controversial song was cut, wasn't it? It was just New York City Cops. And that's the only sort of like naughty. Well, I guess it was cut because of 9/11, wasn't it? But
so the line "they ain't punky. Too smart." Yeah, I mean that really stuck it to them. But yeah, if that's the worst thing that's been said about New York cops. Then yeah.
Is that still banned in America? Because I know they changed the cover because the hand and glove was too risque, and then they removed New York City Cops because of 9/11.
Yeah, because of 9/11.
I wonder if that's ever been restored because the album cover in America is fucking terrible.
It's boring as hell.
Yeah, it's very sort of Nathan Barley controversial. Like, oh, a bum, like, is this it? See what we did there,
I would agree with that. On lyrics, honestly, I think for sure good lyrics elevate a band for me, but I don't need good lyrics to enjoy music. I really connect with music, and it takes me absolutely bloody ages to sometimes actually work out what the lyrics are, and even sometimes what the melody of the singer is. It's happened to me so many times when I've gone to sing karaoke where I'm like, I know this melody. No, you know the chorus, and you've listened to the guitars and bass, and that's it. So I am happy to take the Strokes as face value of rich hipster boys in that respect, because that some of their music is good. So it doesn't bother me too much. But I was surprised by these lyrics nonetheless.
I think that Julian says at the time that people complained they couldn't hear his lyrics, and he said that his vocals are as important as all of the other instruments, so they're all mixed at the same level. So maybe he doesn't think that his lyrics are that important himself. Maybe he's just another instrument, or
they're not. No one's going to have like any like Strokes lyrics tattooed on their arm, or like you're not going to get a Strokes book of like poetry, are you?
It's true, but I guess your next track has some interesting lyrics.
It's got lyrics. Wow. The next track is Razorblade, and I think like probably typifies like what I think about that album and maybe middle period Strokes is like they let the guitarist show off for a bit. It's like, do something twiddly, and then the rest of the band fill in the gaps. It's like the first two albums sounded a bit like a band. From that point onwards, it's like, guitarist, you're pretty good.
Babs, it's always hard to work out who is playing the lead in your songs. Like, is it Albert? Is it
Nick? I haven't analyzed this enough. Like, I haven't gone to see enough live videos of theirs, and I haven't seen them live though I would like to. Like, were they, Fran, just quickly, were they the kind of band that play exactly the songs as on the album, or was there a bit, of extra twiddliness and interaction?
There's no like guitar solos. Some of the tracks sound a bit more punky at times, but I don't know if that's just because they're bored of their first album. Yeah, but it's not as if they're breaking it down for a reggae section or anything. It's pretty much what you expect them to sound like, to be fair. Julian's vocals sometimes it's like he screams rather than sings, but it may be I think in 2004 he was pretty much still a drinker, so that may have affected his stage.
For some reason, and I don't know why, I always presume like the higher guitar is Nick Valenci and the lower Albert Hammond Jr., but I might be wrong, and I haven't listened that much to Albert Hammond Jr. solo stuff. So yes, I'm not quite sure, but on this song, Adam, I will agree with you. This is a weaker one from the album. I usually skip it, and the chorus is annoying. Oh no, my feelings are more important than yours, and it's like taunting almost.
But even there's no melody to the chorus. It's like Razorblade. It's like.
Are you aware of the song Mandy?
By
Rod Stewart.
That's dope. The chorus starts off singing Mandy.
Oh,
Mandy.
Yeah, it is.
Again,
it is.
now I do.
So the final track, Adam.
The final track, but I was just thinking, like, I've really not been persuaded anyway about the Strokes. Is Whatever Happened, which is not much to say about. It's sort of like a drudge, really, of a song. I tried to pick something that I felt really typified the second album, and like this is like right in the middle. You know, Reptilia, clearly a high point, a really nice little guitar songs, proper little guitar hero, a little bit of fun there.
And on bass, great.
Yeah, and that's the one you want to see live. The rest of that album is just, I think what was maybe people liked about like the first album was like quite like upbeat song after song after song, and like the second album is like, I am trying to get through this, is what I feel like lyrically, musically, where the like, yeah, got nothing to offer. I'm not saying I don't like slow music, it's just that I like, it's not energetic in any way.
I guess this is kind of like the Strokes by numbers, and being the opening track, it was maybe like a, don't worry guys, we're still the Strokes. This is what you come to expect. I've always, I wouldn't skip it because it's the Strokes being the Strokes, and back in the day that was fine. I hadn't heard the song for maybe 18 years. It's definitely not a standout. But I think when the album came out, because it had maybe some more slower moments, I kind of enjoyed it a little bit more. It felt like they were kind of not doing the same album again. Looking back, they probably were. But I also think that for me, Reptilia and 1251 are my favourite songs by the Strokes. So I kind of like this album a little bit more.
But I think what this album has that the other one doesn't is synths.
Yeah.
And that's why I really like this song. And yeah, I mean, you were talking about it being an album opener. I really can't disassociate this from being the opener to the second album, which I enjoy, right? So for me, I'm like, yes, of course it's a good song because it's the beginning of Room on Fire. And it was interesting what you were saying about, just to bring it back quickly, Take It or Leave It being the album closer, because I think actually I didn't have Is This It on CD for ages. I had downloaded most of it off Kazaa, Alone Together and Trying Your Luck I only listened to years later, and still to this day I have no idea what the album track is, the album track listing is, whereas Room on Fire, I bought it and listened to it and know the order and everything. So I actually have quite a different relationship in that respect with the first two albums, despite liking them both. I think, yeah, I quite like the synths. He's being a bit more gnarly in his voice again, and it's another kind of good short ending. Strokes are good at this. Like they kind of, sometimes you're not expecting a song to end and it does. But once again, I will agree that I do not know what the hell this is about. And I've got another little snippet. Did they offend us and they want it to sound new? Top 10 ideas for countdown shows. Whose culture is this? And does anyone know? I wait and tell myself, life ain't chess.
Beautiful, Julian.
I mean, is he talking about Chess the Musical? Who knows?
I assume he writes the lyrics. I mean, I'd actually know.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
They go for those like
the music too.
quite obvious metaphors. Like they like a metaphor, and it's quite like, if you handed a lot of those metaphors in a poetry class, they'd be like, you need to find something that's a more original metaphor. You need to find something that hasn't been used as like an image too much, like calling a song Razor Blade. It's like, what do you mean by this? Yeah, it's all quite on the nose. There's something a bit like the gnarliness is really interesting, because I was just thinking like the gnarliness, when he gets quite gnarly, it really reminds me of Pavement. Like that's like the closest like thing there. And like when you listen to Pavement, old Steve gets a bit gnarly, and you're like, I means it. He's grumpy about something, and I've seen them live, and that's it. And it's like, you feel like with the Strokes, Julian's putting that gnarliness in there because he thinks that's how people should sing, rather than he's really got to be in his body about something.
Not to try to keep bringing you on, Adam, but Pavement are one of those bands. I was a huge fan of the Vimes, and they kept getting compared to Pavement. And every time I've tried to listen to Pavement, I'm like, I don't get it, and I don't like this band. So I think I need an intro guide there as well.
Okay, I can give you that. But like actually, there's a real like distinct line between Pavement and the Strokes, and like they are clearly a band who has come afterwards, and like Pavement have gone, you can sing like this, your guitars can sound a bit like this, and Strokes have done that, but simplified it completely. All of the crazy like side bits to go off of.
Do you think that the Strokes influenced any American bands, because like the influence obviously like the Libertines you had with like how they dress, and the Cuba Temple Clause to, you know, being a gang mentality became a popular thing. But I can't really think of many American bands who came out sounding like the Strokes. Really, there's a lot of bands had but apart from that,
I bet they have influenced millions of bands. They're just like, they've never really got anywhere, because like if you heard bands that sound a bit like the Strokes, you would go, they sound like a good support band, you know.
But I think the White Stripes that came out at the same time, I think influenced more bands than
and more influenced by blues and other things as well.
We got a lot of duos and a lot of blues rock sort of came out. But the Strokes, I think that maybe their image was copied more than their sound to a lot of bands.
Yeah.
But perhaps, you know, you like the synth version on this. Do you like their latter albums?
So not really, but I've never, I think since Angles, I don't know if I've sat down and listened to an album beginning to end. I think every time I've tried, I'm like, nah, this isn't for me. Although I think I did save, was it Drag Queen from the EP from 2016? But I have not listened to it in a while. I think that's it. So I think that's the only post-Angle song I have saved on Spotify.
So we asked the question, the Strokes, Babs, overrated or underrated?
It's a difficult one for me, because I think there's many layers to consider here. Are they overrated from this playlist? No, I wouldn't say so, because I enjoy quite a few songs. They're not my favorite songs apart from Duke's Box, but I enjoy quite a few songs. Did they deserve to be as big, even with them, me enjoying their first albums as much as I did? Maybe not. Maybe, as we discussed, kind of image had a lot to do with it, and there were more innovative bands. But I think ultimately for me, because I was new into this type of rock, I didn't hear Pavement, I didn't hear anything else because I didn't know it then. For me, that it's kind of like the original, right? And this is what happens every generation. It's like people discover something and they're like, whoa, this whole new genre. And the old people are like, you fucking idiot, come and listen to some, Genesis or whatever it is. So I'm going to say not overrated, because I think just personally, especially their early stuff, I really loved, and I'm really glad it went around the world. What about you?
You know how the Stone Roses are hailed as like one of the best bands of all time, but isn't that mainly because they did 2 albums and then fucked off? So,
well, and mostly they're hailed for their first album,
exactly.
Well, right?
So if the Stone Roses had stayed together and made worse and worse albums as it went along, they'd be maybe seen as being, like just another 90s indie band. I think if the Strokes had quit in 2005 forever, they would still be seen as being this amazing band. Sadly, because they've released, subpar albums over the past 10 years, I do think they're now probably overrated, because it shows that they had a spark of brilliance, and now they're just, relying on those first albums for the set list. And when you do see them live, I saw them in 2011, it will still, it's just it, basically. I mean, and you got to move on surely from that. So for that reason, I would say they're overrated. Adam, well, we know what you're going to choose.
Well, yeah. I know you know what I'm going to say, but putting aside too many personal subjective feelings, do I think that they are a good band? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they're a good band. Do I think they are overrated, like based on how much people love them and how much praise they get versus other bands? I think they are literally the dictionary definition of overrated. They are like square bullseye overrated.
I will come with the stat that I always like to come with, which is how many Spotify monthly listeners they have. They've got 9.8 million monthly listeners, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. And I'm looking at their last album. The most played song on that, which is called The Adults Are Talking, has 117 million listens. Wow. So people, despite what you're saying, it's interesting because people are still listening to them. They are still listening to the newest stuff. And I think for a lot of fans, it isn't just Last Night and Reptilia as well, because Last Night and Reptilia are the 2 most played songs on there. When you look at the most played songs, it does cover the broad gamut. So yeah, it's interesting, this division of the Strokes between the first 2 albums and onwards.
Good luck to them.
Good luck to the boys.
Strokes, do you think they're overrated? I would love to hear them do one more brilliant album, but who can say? And now for an advert. See you after the break.
Do you like music? Do you like podcasts? Do you like your hosts that are slightly eloquent with their words and well spoken and articulate them in a perfect way? Then you can find 2 out of those 3 things on Pick a Disc. I'm your host Matt Latham, and each fortnight a guest comes onto the podcast to talk about an album that they want to talk about for whatever reason they want to. We talk about the artist, we talk about the songs, and we also talk about the album, and we never talk about the artwork because I always forget. Other than that, we always talk about the good things and why people like what they like, and you'll find that a lot in Pick a Disc. So find us on all your favourite podcatchers of choice, and I look forward to finding out the discs that you're picking.
Underrated.
For your next choice, Adam, who are we going to be discussing?
We're going to be discussing the Hold Steady from America.
Why would you deem them as underrated?
I don't know. Well, I do know. I know in a lot of reasons why. I feel like the Hold Steady write really special songs, like really special music. Like they put a lot of their heart and soul thought into the songs and into who they are as a band. Like there are some bands that genuinely want to have a bit of a movement behind them, and like Hold Steady come with like ideas, philosophy, and you just want to love them. Like I listened to their music a lot before I saw what they looked like, and then I saw these like weird looking blokes in their sort of like, you know, awkward fitting clothes, and I was just like, absolutely love these guys, absolutely love them. Like they tell these beautiful stories from like weird little small American towns about like losers, and like then it's sort of mixed with their sort of religious imagery and beautiful sort of poetic thoughts borrowed from literature, all mixed in with like really weird little bits of wordplay and jokes and stuff like that. So they're sort of both witty, and then like, you know, you think this is a silly, witty song, and then it like really catch you off guard and like really like hit you right in the heart, and all of that going on. Like it's just so rich as music, and it's just what I love about alternative music that makes me feel okay to be a goofball, a loser, you know. And I love the Hold Steady. I would love them, and you know, as far as going underrated, while they have, you know, very dedicated fan base, like they absolutely have this sort of epicness in their sound where they could be headlining Coachella, you know, or like why not put them headlining Glastonbury? Like they've got that as a band. Like they feel as memorable to me to be deserving of that.
So yeah, Adam, when I found out that it was going to be Hold Steady, I thought, oh no, because I remember listening to them and not liking them, but I had not thought about them in years and years. And when I was saying to friends like, oh, you know, next podcast record is going to be the Hold Steady and I don't like them, they were like, why? And I said, I actually don't know because I can't remember. So I was like, okay, well, good that I have a chance to kind of listen to a playlist again. But before I went to listen to your playlist, I wanted to just, you know, sort of skim their Wikipedia page, and I saw that they were partly classified as Heartland rock, which is exemplified by songwriters like Tom Petty, Bob Seger, Bruce Springsteen,
Yep.
all people who I don't like.
Okay.
So I thought, oh no. But then I saw that they were noted for their lyrically dense storytelling. So I was like, okay, definitely on this. Let's go in hard on the lyrics, and I really want to pay attention, and I'm glad that I did. But that was just the mindset that I went in with, which was not entirely positive. So I'll just say that.
I remember them coming out in the mid-noughties out of nowhere, and then like Uncut Magazine and Q were banking away for them. They couldn't get enough of the Hold Steady, and it seemed to be like a small sort of scene of Heartland style bands. Was it like the Gaslight Anthems?
Yeah,
similar Bruce Springsteen loving band, and it seemed to be a sort of like a wave coming over. And I think like maybe Frank Turner was kind of, you know, influenced by that sort of scene, you know, like the, you know, storytelling, real rock and roll. But I didn't love. Was it Boys and Girls in America? Was that the big album that came over first?
Yes.
the third album.
It wasn't. Well, it was their third album, but yeah.
Yeah, the first like
breakthrough.
UK known, and but I saw them, I think at Isle of Wight Festival, and 2010, and I was bowled over because they're fucking brilliant live, and I love the song which we're going to mention later on because I do like Tom Petty, I do like Bruce Springsteen, I do love a piano in rock and roll music, and they do have all those ingredients. For some bizarre reason, I've never really tried to get into them since 2010, so it's been an enjoyable ride. So what was your first track, Adam?
First track is possibly one of my favorites by the Hold Steady. Is Stuck Between Stations. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's definitely the first song I've ever heard by them, and I was just won over from that. It didn't take much, like probably even within the first couple of choruses, like you have piano that feels like an amazing kind of like peak era Elton John piano. You have these lovely bits of guitar that have got like that kind of classic rock vibe in it. The lyrics are ridiculous and they are all over the place, and then like you think it's this like storytelling thing, and then like they've got these like little nice pairs of lyrics like she was a real cool kisser but she wasn't all that strict of a Christian. She was a damn good dancer but she wasn't all that great of a girlfriend, which, you know, as a couplet is just lovely. And it's like, you know, probably at the same time I was studying writing at university, and I was on the lookout for like things that made sense of all of the rules they were trying to teach me. And they were like all of these rules of like, you know, do you have to exactly say what you mean, which is what the Strokes are, or can you find a more interesting way to say the same thing? And like that's what the Hold Steady do. They have fun with language, and it takes you to really interesting places, and like they talk about characters and you think like, oh God, I know someone like that. Or, you know, they talk about situations and you go like, oh God, I've been there and I can feel that. And that's what I get with like Stuck Between Stations, which is like, it's only like a 4-minute song, but it's got like a break in the middle, a guitar solo, and then oh God, you just want to see it live because it's like this like adventure as a song. It's so good. And it's the first track on what you mentioned earlier, Boys and Girls in America.
Was that the album you first heard?
That was the first album I heard. And full disclosure, and this is just my personal opinions, it is my favorite album of all time, is Boys and Girls in America by the Hold Steady. I think like it's perfect. There's probably like a couple of other albums I've put up there with that, but again, because it is a purely personal thing, that's probably my favorite album.
So, Babs?
So
you agree? Okay.
I'm very sorry, Adam.
It's fine.
It started with melodic guitars and tinkly piano. I put no, that's not a combination I like. And I held off on saying anything because we talked about Julian Casablancas' voice. I think his voice sounds terrible underneath all the instrumentation. It is absolutely drowned out by all the instruments. I can't hear what he's saying, and I don't really like it. I prefer, he does a bit more speak singing when the song goes on, and I prefer that. But this one and on a couple of others, I'm like, there's way too much going on here. On the lyrics, you picked up the exact couplet that I did. It's fantastic. Like, and even the title Stuck Between Stations, you can visualize it.
Yeah.
You know, you can visualize it. It can be very metaphorical. So for sure, I would pick up a book of Hold Steady poetry, but music wise, unfortunately, it's really not my bag. Fran?
So it's interesting that the line I chosen was slacking off each other at demonstrations, making sure to make up straight, which may say something about me.
So good.
So Craig refers to himself as a storyteller rather than a songwriter.
Yeah.
Which says a lot about the band. And he doesn't. Is it mainly third person, the songs? Is it?
Yeah.
And he mentions because he's a Catholic, isn't he? He brings up religion and drugs quite often.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
A lot of that stuff. Is he a singer? I kind of put him with Eddie Argos from Art Brut in his delivery.
They toured together a lot.
Yeah.
Do they? Oh, really?
Yeah, they did a big tour together for a while, actually. I wanted to see it, but I didn't.
This is, you know, like if I could think of a Stroke song, I'd think of Last Night. If I could think of a Hold Steady song, I'd choose this, because this has all of the things you expect from a Hold Steady track. It's got, that glorious piano and brilliant guitars, and and like the sort of like his fast, almost rapping delivery, white boy rap maybe. So I enjoyed it, and I think listening to this album again, I also think that this is a glorious album, but it's not their biggest selling album. I think is Stay Positive their biggest selling album, I think.
Yeah. But that just rode, I think that rode the wave they already had, to be honest. Like they'd already been like well established by that point. So who's credited with giving them, and like one of the who was like their big advocate for a long time. This might actually add something to the mix. Maybe this will take
I think I know this. Is it our friend Harry Potter?
Yes, it is. Daniel Radcliffe was a massive Hold Steady fan.
Doesn't surprise me.
Not the reason I loved them, but it was quite interesting, because he was like, I'm a grown-up and I like listening to cool things and I like the Smiths and I like this, and wanted to really like make it clear he was a cool guy, not just like an actor. And it came out like, I love the Hold Steady, you should listen to them. Quite weird. So I'm not going to take any instructions from you, Harry Potter, but yeah, you're right.
What's your next pick?
My next pick is going to be another track from Boys and Girls in America. I resisted picking just 5 tracks from Boys and Girls in America. And I think like it's You Can Make Him Like You, which is interesting. They don't have this sort of like bitter sweetness about them that I sort of find in this song. And it's a real like hug of a song, and it's got some real sort of like, I don't know, it's quite a lovely song. Like the sentiment of it, the lyrics again, it's sort of like this, they have this positivity that's like their vibe, their brand almost. And You Can Make Him Like You really gets, and they are a band that probably, disclaimer, you do want to be getting into them when you're young. And there's something about like, it speaks to that kind of like not understanding the world when you're young, and all of those great bands that every generation has had one of them. Like, God, they get straight through to it, and they no nonsense sort of like smushiness sometimes, but it's also it's banging musically. Like it's quite fun. I want to dance to this, and like some bands as well, like you make a bit of a dick of yourself when you go to see them live because you got your hand in the air and you're like yes, and that's what I get with You Can Make Him Like You.
When I first read the lyrics, I was hoping that it's sarcastic, because you could really take them the wrong way. I mean, I've been dumped by a girl having a crap car, so I thought I shared a pain. Babs, what's your thoughts?
So the guitars are a bit more miserable here, which is what I prefer, because just happy clappy guitars are not for me. But whatever the organ is in the chorus, I really don't like it. I really don't like the earnest piano, but I do prefer it, and I've made notes on this later on. When it's just guitar and drums, I quite like it. It is the everything else. I think there's too much going on musically for me, and especially when you have his voice and the lyrics on top of it. There's that, but I love the lyrics, and I find it just extremely sophisticated, and kind of the elderly aunt telling a girl, there's always other boyfriends, there's always other scenes. I thought that was incredibly original and nice. But once again, lyrics yes, music no.
I put down it needs more Frans, so I'm the opposite. Because there's a really catchy piano line in the chorus, but it's like buried, and I would love to hear that more.
No, thank you.
But it's got such I like the energy that comes with that though. But like those lyrics, like you don't have to deal with the dealers, let your boyfriend deal with the dealers. It is a little bit funny, but also in kind of a bittersweet way. You can wear his old sweatshirt, you can cover yourself like a bruise. Like bloody hell, that's got a lot going on, isn't it? That's visual, those lyrics. That's lovely.
Babs, have you ever seen the Hold Steady?
No,
on TV?
I have not until I googled it, but I did enjoy the description of their bio on Spotify because it opens like this: the Hold Steady didn't sound like any other band who emerged from Brooklyn in the 2000s. Fashion wasn't one of their concerns, for one. So that made me laugh. Like, as in, yeah, they do seem much more normal, much less slick in a positive way.
I mean, I love the contrast between the two bands we discussed, fashion-wise and looks. One band is all about how the image and how cool they are, and then Hold Steady is not at all about how they look. And these are guys who
go and read the article, because I didn't put this. Oh no, I did put this out. So the article that Franz Nicolai wrote about the Meet Me in the Bathroom book. One of the blind spots he was talking about, the image, and he says that he really dislikes in the book how there's this binary between acts from Manhattan versus those in Brooklyn. So he says, like, okay, the Manhattan bands are like sexy, coke sweating, old school Lower East Side rock stars, but Brooklyn bands are a caricature of sexless, pretentious, dressed down uncool kids, very technical musicians who don't really present themselves as rock stars, and are bright, more grounded, and more practically minded. And I think that definitely is the contrast between these two bands. And is he pissed off about how they were represented? I can barely remember the whole story in that book. So
the difference is, like, if you think about like this 2000s rock and sort of why I was picking those two as a band, as like a contrast, like the Hold Steady had been going, like I said, for years and were Lifter Puller, and like their influences maybe more in the Hold Steady were sort of Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, and like other classic rock stuff. But Lifter Puller sound more like grungier, Dinosaur Jr., Minutemen, Superchunk, that sort of like flannel shirt wearing guitar rock there. And it's very insanely lo-fi. And so, like, yeah, that Brooklyn vibe is like, these are these people who would just have for years been doing like tiny shows to no one, and then sort of like the indie scene becomes popular and they find themselves in the scene, but they're like, we've just been doing our thing for ages and it just happens to be popular now. That's what they're like. So they've not been ready or used to looking cool because they've presumably been doing their office jobs or whatever since then.
Yeah, I think the lead singer was working in finance up until and he refused to tell people that he played guitar in case they looked at him worse for being a musician. Was like the worst thing you could be in finance. Do you know what I mean? To be taken seriously.
Yeah, I could imagine that.
So your next choice, Adam,
is going to be Knuckles. From their debut album. And this is a song that goes around a lot. And again, it's, that third person or whatever. And he's talking about, presumably is a fictional character or like an amalgamation of maybe people that he does know. But this character has lots of nicknames. And so it starts like, I've been trying to get people to call me Freddie Knuckles. People keep calling me Right Said Fred, which is again, like as far as like opening couplets go, that's really, I mean, that's funny. And that continues throughout. Like, I've been trying to get people to call me Freddie Mercury. People keep calling me Drop Dead Fred. And you go like, okay, this band have just referenced Freddie Mercury, who everyone knows, and the film Drop Dead Fred featuring Rick Mayall, which I love as a film, but for American people is generally considered a flop or a terrible film. It's quite a niche reference maybe to put in there. And then like it evolves to be a story about like someone who boasts about all of the people he's killed, but that's just lies. This is just a story about someone who like loves boasting and being the center of attention when really it's all like sort of shallow claims. But I love the way that evolves throughout the song, and he sort of gives you a misdirection. I love how it sort of plods in this like sort of slightly silly way. Even like the keyboard sounds a bit like silly. And I like those bands like that. Like, I don't know if you know Atom and His Package, but I like that sort of like, this sounds like it's been done in its bedroom kind of like synth. It's really different to like those songs in Boys and Girls in America. Like it sounds a bit more homemade, but it was their first album, I suppose. But it's just bloody daft and I love it.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the best track I've heard by Hold Steady. I mean, yeah, someone of our age to have, like I said, Drop Dead Fred, White Said Fred, and Sunny D all mentioned. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Apparently, I read that he knew someone who'd always try and get people to call him Diamond Dave, and it never worked. And that's where it came from. There is people who go to university and try and bring on this new persona by wearing shades. Yeah, and that's where he got the idea from. And like for some reason, when he was in bands in the 90s, there's always a guy who would call him Fred, pissed him off, and that's where he got the whole Fred idea from. But interesting. I think it's written by himself, and usually he co-writes with the guitar player, or the keyboardist. So maybe that's why it's got a different feel to the other tracks. I also love the keyboard fuzz. I think it's brilliant. It feels more like a post-punk track than like a classic rock of like Petty or Springsteen to me. And I have saved this to my Spotify, so can't be too bad.
I also much preferred this to the first two songs. I much prefer his voice here, and the lyrics, they made me laugh immediately. Like they connected with me on an immediate level. And I quite like how the synths interplay with the guitar and drums. But then by the second verse, the instrumentation builds again, and then I stopped liking it. Again, it's just, once again, clearly this is my issue with them. I'm like, stop trying to throw everything but the kitchen sink at it. Like, actually, sometimes less is more for me anyway. But yeah, I did like this one far more than the first two.
This is musically closer to, and no big surprise, closer to Lifter Puller, the band they did before.
Sure.
I'd never heard of Lifter Puller, so yeah, might be worth checking out.
Are they hard to get hold of? Are they on Spotify?
I think they're on Spotify now. It was a real treat for me. Like when I first found out about Lifter Puller, they 10 years ago were much more difficult to find on the internet. It is very much a band, like they're finding out what the Hold Steady is, and some of it's good, some of it's very boring, but it's more guitar-y, Babs, so you'll be pleased there's less synth and dramatic piano going on. It sounds a bit more like a grunge band. Synth is
fine. Earnest piano is what I don't like. Yeah, Elton John piano is not a good thing for me.
Yes, it's none of that going on. Also, there's two Hold Steady albums that I've not picked any tracks off of, and they are sans piano. Like the middle period, their pianist left and came back, but there's a good chunk where there isn't one. So maybe you like that. I hate them.
I also I can't believe I forgot to mention this, but Franz Nicolai, I read, was named the #1 accordionist in punk rock for his work in other bands, which I was surprised to see, and surprised that I couldn't hear any accordion on these songs. So clearly they go into a lot of different genres.
He's the best moustache in punk rock.
Oh yeah, and he wears a beret better than most people I know. I heard that Craig, he had given up on music and then he sort of drive-by truckers and thought, hang on, we can still do this. There's room for a classic rock band in the noughties. It wasn't being done. That's why he started again, because otherwise he basically given up on music. Then that makes sense. Yeah, I love all of those other bands as well around that same sort of time. That makes sense. There's like loads of great stuff in the noughties that's, Americana influenced by classic rock. Wilco is another one of my big favorite bands, and you could put Wilco next to Hold Steady. There's some shaking of the head there from bands.
You mentioned Fleet Foxes before. I was like, oh yeah, no, these are.
You used to get like Lamb Chop as well, isn't that sort of end of the road festival sort of set list,
Yeah. Cardigan rock.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Überschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
So your next track is?
No, the next track is Banging Camp, and this is from their second album, Separation Sunday. If I were recording this at home right now, I'd show you my lovely all white vinyl of Separation Sunday, which is very proud of. It's a concept album, and Separation Sunday is a concept album, which is trying to marry the two lyrical loves of the Hold Steady, which is basically drugs and Catholicism. And they do it through this fictional character, Holly, sometimes called Hallelujah. And and like Banging Camp is sort of like right in the middle of the album. And again, why do I love it? Because it's got a catchy little riff. It's got some silly little synth messiness going on, which I'm sure Babs loves. And then the lyrics tell this bizarre little story which unfolds, which is, about Holly and her exploits, starting again with those, lyrics that draw you in, like the first great line of a book. Holly wore a string around her finger. She said it helps her to remember all the nights that we got over. Beside it ties her outfit all together. Oh, there we go. Straight in. It's a little story. Who's Holly? What's this? What? I still don't really understand a lot of it, but I love it.
I kind of thought it's a lady who's got a past who keeps getting pushed down into temptation and she can't keep helping herself, meeting up with men and, I guess doing drugs, but, wants to move on. That's what I got from it, Babs.
Well, as technically a Catholic myself, but in culture's name only, that makes a lot more sense if you're saying that they're Catholic, because there's a lot of like, oh, sin and the cross. I think it's absolutely filmic, the lyrics to this song, because I read it as either someone who's a bit wild and feels conflicted about it, or someone who's taken advantage of, because when it says she was shaky but still trying to shake it, half naked and 3/4 wasted, she was completely alone, I was like, well, that's a bit drugs in the drink sort of thing. And absolutely lapped up the lyrics. But musically, my least favorite song, I think I called it Bad Art Brute, because the one thing I did like was the speak singing, but just the guitars and the ending with the brass, no thank you.
See, I like a false ending, and we have a false ending. So I
the
think
brass, killed it for me.
I think the second half personally was better than the first half. The first half was kind of more of a simple 2-chord rock tune, and then by the time the second half comes in, when all the other guitars, I think it steps up a gear. I want more Franz. I'm missing him, unfortunately. Again, bring back the Franz. So I enjoyed it, and it's a dark, interesting story. And because when I do this podcast, I probably wouldn't even thought about the looks at all, but because we look into it, I always kind of enjoy discovering some great writing. And I would definitely check out this album if it's a concept album. Also, so you did 3 albums in 3 years, Adam, is that correct?
I don't know about the numbers of it. Yeah, I suppose that sounds about right.
Boom,
I mean, they're
boom.
pretty prolific, because even there's lots of Hold Steady albums, and then there's some Craig Finn solo stuff in between, and then there's Lift to Puller. There's if you like, and this is, let's face it, a podcast for music nerds, it is a good band to deep dive into. You get your value for money with the Hold Steady.
Australians also about Minneapolis is kind of an uncool location to have some amazing people from, like Lizzo, Prince, Replacements, Hold Steady. It's kind of random, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I wouldn't know where it is on the map, but I know a lot about it from the songs because they mention it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a city of contrasts, isn't it? Like, I think it has this very big underground scene, but like is also, I don't think the city, but the surrounding area quite conservative. So yeah, maybe that's what makes good art.
They're talking a lot about kids going skating and listening to punk and all ages shows and like hardcore music. And it's like, again, like trying to find like music that you relate to as a kid. Like all of my friends were goths and metalheads and losers and stuff like that. And like,
just like all your friends are losers. That's good to know.
Yeah. And I got these like lyrics of people who are sort of like, trying to figure out their life and sort of living in small towns and feeling quite lost. And it's like, that's what real life is a bit more like. And for a band to be singing that, that's that's what you want to hear as your like festival anthem, that sort of stuff, rather than like this feeling that everything is all Hollywood and shiny. Small town life, real small town life. That's probably the absolute sort of Bruce Springsteen connection with that, is like Bruce Springsteen is like those people who work normal jobs and live a real life. They like that.
And speaking of festival anthems, with your final track.
My final track, it is sort of anthem, and like possibly it's like not like my favorite Hold Steady song, Stay Positive. That's the name of the song at all. but there's something about it, and I think what it represents, it's like weird to imagine. It comes in quite late in their career, like their fourth album, but it feels like they sort of feel like they've earned the right to do something that's just out and out their philosophy and what they believe in. There's a lot about like the Hold Steady world that doesn't like marry with who I am as a person. I'm not religious. I don't take drugs, but I love like straight edge culture. I don't drink, smoke, eat meat, that sort of stuff. And I'm a big fan of like my personal philosophy as like someone who makes stuff is about like being productive, doing stuff, you know, pushing yourself to do that, and that sort of like self-motivation, which sounds super cheesy. And there is like you can only listen to Stay Positive as a song, and like the warning is in the title, like this is going to be cheesy, like from the off. That's fine. Like some songs are just that, and there's moments in your life for songs that are cheesy from the off. Like if you're going to sit down and listen to Good Riddance by Green Day, you know what's happening there. You know what's happening there. Stay Positive by Hold Steady. I always love this as a song, and it was one of the really good tracks in that fourth album, which came straight after this album I absolutely adored, and was just like more of the same. I once went to see Josie Long live at the Fringe in Edinburgh, and this was like her opening music. She had this playing before she came on stage, and I know Josie a little bit well enough that I could sort of like wave at her, and I was like, yeah, like this. I think this is like something that you either sort of choose to believe as like a thought, and I think it's like it's got a tongue in cheek, like it sort of like says stay positive because it's also slightly going, the world's a bit shit, as a song. It's not like stay positive like we can do this, let's all clap our hands, put our head in the sand. It's like stay positive because you've got to,
Yeah.
Else like all of the shit has won if you don't.
I mean, they even reference it in the song because it says it's one thing to start with a positive jam and it's another thing to see it all through.
Yeah, which is absolutely a self-referential lyric, because Positive Jam is the first song on the first Hold Steady album.
Very nice.
Isn't there other references in this song to other characters I heard?
Yeah, it all sort of they know what they're doing. Like it is like, that people study Nick Cave lyrics, like they're putting stuff in there for people to go and sort of like uncover and put little gems in, like referencing back to each other. I think there are a few little references to other Hold Steady songs and albums and stuff.
I loved this when I first saw them on Jaws Holland. Franz with his hand in there going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I will remember for the rest of my life. Also, I love the interface organ, which I also like. The Walkman, the Rat, and it has a very similar introduction. I lyrically, it kind of reminds me of myself. Like it seems like he's too old to be hanging out with the young people, doing young people things. I'm like, oh, that's me, isn't it? Shall I be at this gig when everyone's 20 years old? And I kind of enjoy that. I guess with the chorus, it's always going to be the only sort of like radio hit in the UK. It's probably why I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also remember off the album. Is it something in Memphis? What's the track about Memphis?
Sequestered in Memphis.
The Curse of Memphis was another one I used to adore.
Actually, yeah.
But yeah, so it's a perfect way to end the list, because it's a track that people my age will maybe know of the Hold Steady. Babs, are you going to be positive or
somewhat? The chorus didn't leave my mind. Like once I heard it, it was stuck in there from the first listen. I read that Craig Finn says that the album's about the idea of aging gracefully and how to stay true to the ideals and ideas you had when you were younger. And I love that. Like I do love when bands don't just write about drugs, sex, love. That's quite boring. And this is clearly again so sophisticated, so many good lines, and kind of I really enjoy the referentialness of it. Like most kids give me credit for being down with it when it was back in the day when things were way different, etc. there's probably going to come a time when the scene will seem less sunny, it will probably get druggy, and the kids will seem too skinny. Fran, I think is what you were saying. But I cannot help but give similar kind of critique, which is when it's just a riffy guitar and the drums and his voice, I like it. But when the organs come in and the melodic guitar, I switch off. But I can understand, I can totally understand why people would like this song and others, even if it doesn't chime with me. And yeah, again, Adam, I will go for that poetry book over the album any day of the week. But yeah. Even without the music, their lyrics are absolutely solid enough to be read alone, which you really can't say of many musicians, I think.
So maybe you'll enjoy his solo material. Is that just him and a guitar?
But how melodic is it? That's my question.
I find it quite boring, solo material.
Okay.
It's okay. I think they're throwing a few horns in there for some reason. The Craig Finn stuff.
So maybe not.
No, it's fine. It's like, the thing about them is like, these are a selection of the ones that I love. There's a lot that I love, especially the first 4 albums, and also the last album. But even when on the albums I don't love as much, I never find them boring. They're always interesting. Even if it doesn't quite hit me in the same way, like, I like that classic rock vibe that Boys and Girls in America has.
Are you able to gauge how big they are in the UK? Like, I don't notice them doing UK tours. Is it maybe like a band you do like one big date in London and then go off again?
They don't tour as often as I like. They'll do a tour per album. I've seen them in like Shepherd's Bush Empire, I think, and in Bristol I saw them in one of the smallish venues, quite small venue there. They're a band that I've always managed to get to the front to. It's not difficult to get to the front. Like, they have enough followers, but like, I wish they had more. That's for me, like, when I was going through like, who do I think is underrated, it's like, that could be millions of people, but like, it was quite easy for this one to go like, the Hold Steady, for me personally, should be bigger.
And Babs, I guess you haven't got any Belgium stats, or do you, for the...
Well, on overall global monthly listeners, it's quite low. It's 135,000, despite Stuck Between Stations, which is the biggest song on there, having 3,243,000. So, is it that it's just a few songs on some playlists? But yeah, that did surprise me on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm like, to be honest, I didn't like them when they first came out, and I kind of haven't heard them since, not knowingly. They seem to be on a Game of Thrones soundtrack.
That is correct, yeah.
And I'm not there, which doesn't surprise me, that the film about Bob Dylan. But yeah, if we're asking the question of are they underrated, I think for me personally, no, because if they were more overrated, I'd be listening to them more, and I genuinely don't want to. If I'm going purely on the lyrics, 100%, I think Craig Finn should find some way of, I don't know, like speaking them out or writing a book or something like that. But there's something about the Hold Steady, and I don't know, similar bands like The National and other people, I'm just like, no, like, why? Like, when people like them, they really like them, and I just don't get it. So and yeah, unfortunately, musically I still didn't, even though I can appreciate the lyrics. So terribly sorry.
Well, I mean, I don't know the album's back to front, but I enjoyed all 5 tracks. So therefore, going by those songs, I will say they are underrated. And I've listened to the new album, and it doesn't seem to be a massive departure from the previous ones. They haven't gone down a dubstep scene yet. So yeah, I will probably just listen to some more Hold Steady. So yeah, I'm sorry that Babs had a hard time.
Okay, I still enjoyed, this is why I love this podcast. It's like, I enjoyed being given the homework, and now I know more about them, and I'm more informed, and definitely, genuinely, like, would be up for going and reading the lyrics.
Can I ask a question? Are they worse than Crowded House?
Oh, I mean, no, because they have better lyrics than Crowded House.
Hey now.
That hurts.
Hey now.
Hurts a little bit. But
Crowded House were the most contentious so far between Fran and I. He tried to convince me they were not overrated, and didn't manage, unfortunately.
We've decided that the Whole Steady are underrated 2-3. So congratulations to Whole Steady fans. A win for Adam, although we did decide. Well, no, yeah, I guess the Strokes are also overrated.
Yeah, I'm outfoxed here today.
Oh dear.
Bloody man coming in here. No.
So let us know at home what your thoughts are. And thank you again, Adam, for being our guest.
Thank you.
Where can our listeners find you? If you want to be found, it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, an old follow on Twitter is fine. I'm usually putting stuff there that gets 1 or 2 likes, and I'd like to up it to 2 to 3 likes. So yeah, that's Twitter at Larty McParty. Possibly also got myself to blame a little bit there, not putting the Twitter handle as my name, but yeah, you can find me there, winding up Tory MPs and putting weird, confusing memes and opinions on music. Lots of them.
So, Babs, do you have anything else to discuss before we leave?
Well, given that they came up, if you really want to see Fran and I, go for it. Go and listen to our underrated New Zealand Crowded House Lady Hawk episode. We make nice by the end, and I think that's it from me. Fran,
just track down some of Adam's previous work if you can. He's a great writer and comedian, so give it a go. And I will say thank you for listening to the podcast, and see you soon.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to hearing it. Bye.
And there we go. Another episode has ended of Over Underrated. Thank you for getting this far, and don't forget you can follow us and chat to us on social media. We are OU Music Pod on Twitter and Over Underrated Music Pod on Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends, and let us know of any bands or artists you want us to chat about. Until then.